Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big ideas. Today, we're diving into something from the Bible that honestly might just turn everything you thought you knew about the Old Testament completely upside down.
So let's just kick things off with a pretty wild question, one that kind of challenges what most of us assume about the Law of Moses. Was it this perfect system that people just weren't good enough to follow, or was something else going on entirely? I mean, was it, in a way, designed to fail?
All right, so how are we going to tackle this? Well, first, we're going to look at the law's own shocking prediction about itself. Yeah, you heard that right. Then we'll dig into its real job as a mirror, not a cure. From there, we'll see how this all pointed towards something totally new, a new covenant, and finally, how Jesus walks onto the scene and fulfills this entire incredible plan.
Okay, let's get right into it. And to do that, we have to go back to the source, right back to the book of Deuteronomy, to the very moment Moses is giving the law to the people of Israel.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. This is staggering. Before Israel even gets a chance to try, before they even cross the Jordan River into the Promised Land, God, through Moses, says with complete certainty, you're going to fail. He says they will break the very covenant he's laying out for them right then and there. Wow.
And the context here is everything. This isn't just Moses being a downer. This is his farewell tour, his final sermon. The ink on the law is barely even dry. And he tells them, take this scroll and put it right next to the Ark of the Covenant. But here's the kicker. Not as a friendly guidebook, but as a legal witness against you. I mean, from day one, it was set up to be the prosecution's key evidence in a future trial.
And this wasn't a one-off comment either. This idea is woven all through Deuteronomy. A couple of chapters before this, Moses flat out tells the people that even after seeing all these crazy miracles, God had not given you a heart to understand. So the expectation of failure, it's literally built into the system right from the get-go.
Okay, so this begs a huge question, right? If the law wasn't meant to save them, if it was given with the expectation they'd fail, then what on earth was it for? Why give a set of rules you know people are going to break?
And this right here, this is the absolute core of the whole idea. The law was never the medicine, it was the diagnostic tool. Think of it like an MRI for the human soul. Its job wasn't to cure the disease of sin. Its job was to produce a perfect, high-definition image showing just how bad the sickness really was.
And this isn't just a modern take. Hundreds of years later, you have the Apostle Paul looking back at all this history, and he basically connects the dots for us. He says, look, the point of the law wasn't to make people good, the point was to make the problem of sin, so obvious, so undeniable that no one could miss it.
You can even see it in the structure of the agreement itself, in the covenant. It was a super simple conditional contract. You obey, you get blessings. You disobey, you get curses. But here's the thing. This perfect, holy standard was being applied to people that Moses himself called stiff-necked, people with hearts that just couldn't fully obey. So what's the only possible outcome? The curse. It was designed to show.
Now, this diagnosis didn't stop with Moses. Fast forward a few centuries, and Israel's prophets are watching this failure play out in real time. And boy, did they understand the root cause.
You know, when the prophets saw Israel constantly breaking the covenant, their message wasn't just, hey, try harder, do better. No, they didn't blame the rules. They went deeper. They pointed directly at the real source of the problem, the very thing the law was designed to expose in the first place.
And the prophet Jeremiah, man, he just nails it. He diagnoses the human condition itself, saying the heart is desperately sick. And think about it. If you apply a perfect, healthy law to a sick heart, what's the only thing it can do? It can't heal it. It can only condemn it. It just proves how sick it is. So, because they got the diagnosis right, the prophets started talking about a future cure. Jeremiah promised a new covenant, specifically because the first one was broken. Ezekiel took it a step further and said God himself would perform a spiritual heart transplant, giving his people a new heart. And Isaiah predicted that this new covenant wouldn't even be a code of laws, but a person. They were all pointing to this massive divine intervention that had to come from God alone.
And all this diagnosis and all this promise, it sets the stage perfectly for the arrival of Jesus. And his interaction with the law is so specific, and honestly, it's so often misunderstood.
Jesus comes right out and says it. Don't think I'm here to just tear up the law. He's not trashing it. He's not saying it was a mistake. He says he came to fulfill it, to complete its purpose. And what was that purpose? to show the problem that only he could solve. He fulfills it by being the one person who could live it out perfectly, succeeding where everyone else had failed.
The story of the rich young ruler is just a perfect example of this in action. A guy comes to Jesus and asks, "How do I get eternal life?" And what does Jesus do? He holds up that mirror, the law. The man, a little too confidently, says, "Yep, done all that." So Jesus pushes on one little spot, one command about loving God more than your stuff, and bam, the mirror does its job. It instantly reveals the man's true idol. The law works perfectly as a diagnostic tool, but notice, it has zero power to change the man's heart. He just walks away sad.
And you see this contrast laid out so clearly in John's Gospel. It says the law, that's the diagnostic tool, the accuser, the witness against us, was given through Moses. But the cure, grace, and truth, that came through Jesus Christ. He's the fulfillment, the solution to the problem the law exposed. Okay, so now let's zoom out. Let's pull the camera back and see how all these pieces fit together into one single amazing story that runs from the first page of the Bible to the last.
When you look at the big picture, you see this one consistent idea flowing through the whole narrative. It starts with Moses, saying the law will be a witness against you. Then the prophets come and say, God has to change your hearts. Then Jesus arrives and says, I am the fulfillment of what you cannot do. Then Paul explains it theologically. The law brings death so that grace can bring life. And finally, the book of Hebrews just closes the case, saying the old covenant is obsolete because the new, better one is here.
And this one sentence really just sums up the whole paradigm shift we're talking about. The law was never, ever meant to save Israel. It was meant to prepare Israel, and through them, the whole world, for Christ. It wasn't plan A, it was the essential setup for the main event.
So when Israel failed to keep the law, that wasn't God's plan going off the rails. It wasn't a surprise. That was the plan unfolding exactly as it was meant to. The law's job was to make the diagnosis of our sinfulness so painfully clear that the cure, the grace found in Jesus, would be absolutely, undeniably, breathtakingly good news.
Paul just captures this whole shift so brilliantly. He calls the law, the rules carved in stone, a ministry of death. Why? Because its perfect standard can only condemn us sinners. But he puts that right up against the ministry of the Spirit, which brings real life, real forgiveness, and the very heart change the prophets could only dream of.
And that really leaves us with one last thing to think about. If God's perfect law for Israel was designed to be a mirror to show them a problem so deep that only God could fix it, well, what are the mirrors we look into today? What in our own lives shows us that same need for something or someone outside of ourselves?